The silver clink of cutlery echoed through the sleek, modern dining room of the King penthouse, each sound a metronome for the tension that simmered just beneath the surface. Olivia King, queen of a global tech empire and mistress of precision, sat composed at the head of the table, her eyes hidden behind dark lenses. Her tailored black dress hugged her with armor-like grace. Her head remained unnaturally still, lips parted slightly, the picture of a woman adjusting to sudden blindness. Across from her, Marcus King carved a slice of salmon with careful tenderness. He leaned over, guiding her fork toward the plate like a man devoted to his wife's comfort. "There you go, sweetheart," he said, his voice soft and warm, betraying none of the secrets buried beneath his charm. He brushed a kiss across her forehead, his hand lingering a second longer than necessary, part habit, part performance. Then he smiled and excused himself to answer a buzzing phone on the kitchen counter. As his footsteps faded, Olivia's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Her chin lifted a degree, her head pivoting toward him. Behind those dark glasses, her eyes were sharp, alive, following every movement. She heard him murmur low into the receiver, his back turned, his voice just out of reach. Her jaw clenched, narration seeped in like a whispered confession. I gave him everything, my heart, my empire, my name, but something changed, and I needed to know who is Marcus King when he thinks I can't see him. Her fingers tensed slightly around the fork, a flicker of memory igniting the scene like lightning behind her lids. 3 nights ago, the same voice she once trusted with boardroom secrets and pillow talk had become unfamiliar. Olivia had come downstairs for a glass of water when she heard him on the phone. His tone was low, urgent, as if every word cost him something he wasn't willing to admit. "She doesn't suspect a thing. The papers are ready." The words had stabbed her through the dark. She stayed frozen in the hallway, heart thudding behind her ribs, not breathing until the call ended. That moment planted the seed. Within 24 hours, the plan had formed. She would pretend just long enough. Blindness wasn't hard to mimic for someone who'd navigated hostile takeovers and media trials. She knew how to perform under pressure, and if Marcus King had secrets, she would find them unseen and unheard, hiding in plain sight. Now, back at the dinner table, Olivia's expression remained serene. The perfect wife, the helpless victim. But under the surface, her mind ticked like a bomb, calibrated and cold. The test had begun. Olivia King had always been a woman who saw the world in code systems, structures, patterns. She'd built her first program on a borrowed laptop in a Lagos cyber cave, back when ambition was the only currency she could afford. What began as a simple app to help local vendors track inventory grew into an empire. 10 years later, she sat at the helm of a billion-dollar tech conglomerate, hailed in headlines as Africa's Iron Matron of innovation. She was composed, intelligent, ruthlessly efficient. But no amount of data could prepare her for the unpredictability of human betrayal, especially when it wore the face of the man she once trusted more than herself. Marcus King had arrived in her life like a summer storm, handsome, attentive, with an effortless charm that softened her edges. He was a former sales executive with a practiced smile and a gift for persuasion, and when he left his job to support her full-time, it felt romantic. For a while, they were electric together, him by her side at galas, whispering sweet nothings on long flights, defending her from cynical investors. But somewhere along the way, the sweetness turned thick, like syrup gone rancid. He stopped encouraging her. He started managing her, subtly at first rescheduling meetings she didn't know she'd missed, declining invites on her behalf, setting up filters on her email to reduce her stress. Olivia began to notice the smallest inconsistencies, moments where her autonomy slipped like sand through a sieve. Her phone buzzed with odd notifications, cryptic calendar reminders she hadn't set, messages previewing subject lines like draft will and asset allocation. Each time she tried to ask Marcus about them, he deflected with a loving smile or a hand on her back, always followed by a soft, "You're just overwhelmed, babe. Let me handle it." What unnerved her wasn't what he said, it was how icily he said it, like a man rehearsing lines he no longer needed to believe. Tosin, her younger brother, and perhaps the only person who saw Olivia without the mask, had started to visit more often. The last time they were alone, his eyes scanned the hallway before he leaned in and said, "You're not crazy. He's circling you like prey." The words lodged in her chest like glass. Olivia didn't answer. She rarely did when emotion threatened her logic, but she listened. She always listened to Tosin. He had warned her when investors were trying to undercut her early shares. He had flagged a fake audit long before it could damage her company. Now he was warning her again, but this time the predator wasn't on the board. He was in her bed. The confirmation came the night she found the drawer. Marcus was out in unexpected gym session, and Olivia, left alone in a house designed to be beautiful but not lived in, wandered the study. The drawer wasn't even locked. Inside, beneath folders marked with her company's logo, was a legal draft of a will. Her will, only this one named Marcus King as sole beneficiary. In the event of her death, no contingencies, no charities, not even tossing everything would go to Marcus. There was even a medical affidavit from a neurologist she had never met, confirming a diagnosis she never received. Olivia didn't cry. She didn't scream. She made tea, sat by the window, and stared into the skyline. She had built systems from nothing. She had brought nations to her negotiating table. If Marcus thought he could dismantle her life piece by piece, then he underestimated the woman he married. That night, she drafted her own plan, not in ink or code, but in silence. The next morning, she collapsed in the kitchen. Fainted, she said. When she woke, she was blind. The neurologist confirmed a rare flare-up of optic neuritis, stress-induced, temporary but severe. Her dark glasses became her new mask. She smiled politely when Marcus hovered, let him guide her through hallways. She'd designed herself, and when he thought she wasn't watching because she wasn't supposed to be able to, she took notes, quietly, precisely. Rita, her longtime housekeeper and the one constant through every chapter of Olivia's life, said nothing, but her silence was laced with knowing. Rita had been there in the beginning, folding laundry next to Olivia's mother, then packing suitcases as Olivia built her empire. She didn't ask questions when the glasses appeared or when Olivia began tapping walls with a cane. But she looked too long at Marcus sometimes, her lips pursed as if trying to keep something dangerous from slipping out. The house had never been quieter, but in that quiet, Olivia heard everything. The home she once built with pride now felt like a beautifully decorated trap. She moved through it like a ghost, watching her husband through veiled eyes, letting him believe he had the upper hand. Because pretending to be blind wasn't weakness. It was war. It began with a fall. Not a real one, but real enough to convince a room full of executives. Olivia had waited for the moment, the boardroom just clearing, her assistant distracted. By a call, she staggered, then collapsed, knocking her tablet to the marble floor. By the time Marcus arrived at the hospital, she was already prepped in a white bed, under dim lights, her expression disoriented and pale. The doctor, hand-picked, through a discreet connection, delivered the diagnosis she had orchestrated: sudden cortical blindness brought on by acute neurological stress. Marcus's face had shifted the moment the words left the doctor's mouth. First worry, then a strange tightness around his mouth, like gears turning behind concern. In the days that followed, Marcus played the devoted husband. He brought her flowers too bright, too cheerful, like he was dressing a stage. He made breakfast, fluffed pillows, tucked her in with theatrical tenderness. But Olivia had always understood people best in the moments between their performances. She began noticing things almost immediately. Doors that used to stay open were now locked during the day. The gate's security code she'd always known was suddenly changed for safety. Calls from her investors and legal team dried up without explanation. When she mentioned Tosin, Marcus smiled a little too tightly and said, "Your brother should give you space while you're adjusting." But Olivia had been trained in deception long before this. She began to memorize the rhythm of Marcus's footsteps, the tone of his voice when he spoke in hushed tones from the balcony, thinking she was asleep or unable to see. She sat in the living room one morning, silent and still, while he paced just outside on a call. "Yes, I know, it's early, but if we can move the stocks before the quarterly review, she won't notice." No, she's not lucid enough to challenge it. We just need her signature now, while she's still legally competent. Each word landed like a hammer blow, but Olivia's face remained placid, blank. That night, she waited until he went for a jog and unlocked the old filing cabinet in the study. She found a printed property listing for one of her Lagos apartments marked as available for viewing. She had never approved a sale. She hadn't even known the property was being assessed. Rita, quiet as ever, began to show signs of unease. She lingered longer in Olivia's room, folding clothes that didn't need folding, her hands tight with nervous energy. One evening, as Marcus stepped out for groceries, Rita finally whispered, "Madam, if there's something you need," but she didn't finish. The next morning, Olivia found Rita's phone confiscated and a new house policy printed on the fridge about outside communication. Marcus said it was for her protection. Olivia made her next move carefully. A network of hidden cameras had already been installed, using a team she trusted from her cybersecurity firm. No outside contractors, no digital trace. The small devices were embedded in vents, bookshelves, the back of decorative clocks. Every hour Marcus spent in the house became footage. At night, Olivia reviewed the tapes with headphones and encrypted software. She watched her husband pour wine and toast himself in the mirror. She saw him take calls late into the night, discussing asset transfers, legal clauses, cognitive decline. Once, he opened her safe and photographed a file labeled Foundation Succession Plan, then deleted the camera footage from the main hallway. Then a backup was already uploading to a cloud account only Olivia could access. The mask of love was slipping, frame by frame. He wasn't just trying to manage her, he was erasing her, slowly, strategically, as if she were a chess piece to be cleared from the board before the real game began. Her worst fears were no longer hypothetical. They had shape, sound, paper, trails, and if she'd waited just a few days longer to suspect him, she might never have seen any of it coming. But now she was watching, and he didn't know the house had grown colder, not in temperature, but in tone. Every hallway felt like a set, every interaction rehearsed. Olivia moved like a shadow, unseen even in the space she once ruled. Marcus had grown bolder with each passing day. Perhaps it was arrogance, or perhaps he'd convinced himself she truly was blind, that her mind had begun to fray. Either way, he stopped hiding his movements. One morning, Olivia heard the distinct click of heels echoing across the marble floor. Not Rita, not anyone from her medical team. Marcus introduced the woman as a nurse, claiming she had been sent by the neurologist to monitor Olivia's condition more closely. But the moment she spoke, Olivia's stomach turned. The voice was unmistakable, soft, confident, practiced. The voice she had heard weeks ago during that hushed phone call. She doesn't suspect a thing. The papers are ready. She didn't react. She turned her head toward the sound with the vacant look she'd perfected and simply nodded, allowing them to believe the performance. But her mind was already unraveling the threads. That night, as Rita helped her to bed, the older woman lingered longer than usual. In the dim light, she pressed a folded slip of paper into Olivia's palm and whispered, "She's not a nurse, she's a lawyer. Family and probate law, specializes in asset transfers." Then she left before Olivia could respond, her footsteps light but urgent. The trap was no longer forming, it was tightening. Later that night, Olivia lay in bed feigning sleep, breath deep and steady as she listened to footsteps outside her door. The latch clicked. The lawyer's voice, low and smooth, murmured through the darkness. "Just have her sign these. We can use the power of attorney after the next appointment, once the doctors officially declare her unfit." Marcus responded in a hushed but confident tone. "She's already starting to forget things. I'll tell her it's just insurance forms. She trusts me." Her body lay still under the sheets, but her heart pounded like a war drum. She remembered the night he proposed on stage, under lights, during the launch of her first product in Nairobi. Cameras flashing, reporters cheering. She'd said yes with tears in her eyes, believing she was stepping into love and legacy at once. Now, she wondered if that moment had been a performance too. Just another merger dressed in roses and applause. By day, Marcus adopted a new role, that of the concerned caregiver. You imagined that noise. Liv, you're overtired. Or, you don't need to worry about bills. Just rest. He handed her documents with vague explanations. Property insurance, medical consent, routine business forms. She never signed. Her fingers would hover over the page before she smiled and said, "Let me read it in Braille first." Each time, his frustration was a little harder to conceal. Olivia began testing him. She intentionally spoke aloud about a fake bank password within earshot, planted notes about a fabricated offshore account, even hinted at moving her assets into a private trust. Within days, her security team reported attempted access from Marcus's laptop. She watched the footage of him muttering the fake password under his breath while hunched over her computer. He believed he was outmaneuvering her. Instead, he was walking straight into the web she was quietly weaving. Then came the moment she could no longer deny. The cameras caught Marcus in the study with the lawyer, holding one of her old power of attorney forms. They watched a video of her signature on a tablet. Then Marcus carefully forged it by hand on a new document. Olivia's stomach twisted as she watched the playback in secret. He moved with the confidence of a man who had already claimed the throne, signing as though she were already gone. But she wasn't gone. She was watching, and she wasn't alone. Tosin had seen the signs. He had begun assembling documents, speaking to legal experts, and pulling her financial records together. Olivia hadn't told him everything. She couldn't risk it, but he had known her long enough to read between the silences. He began building a case, quiet and methodical, ensuring every forged document, every fraudulent call, every manipulated asset had a trail. He reached out to the doctor Marcus had tried to manipulate and found discrepancies in the medical reports. He traced the lawyer's firm, discovering multiple clients whose assets had disappeared under similar circumstances. Piece by piece, he was constructing the truth. Olivia knew it would take time, but they were no longer reacting. They were preparing, and in the meantime, she stayed quiet. She smiled when Marcus kissed her forehead. She nodded politely when he talked about light at the end of the tunnel. She let the lawyer hover, watching her as if she were already a memory. But Olivia wasn't vanishing. She was waiting. The evening air was thick with quiet anticipation as Olivia King prepared to host a dinner unlike any other in the sprawling dining room of the penthouse. The table was set immaculately, candles flickering softly against the polished silverware and crystal glasses. The guests were carefully selected. Marcus, who arrived wearing his usual confident smile. Rita, ever the silent sentinel. Tosin, her steady anchor. And a handful of close friends, trusted allies, who understood more than they let on. Olivia greeted them all with warmth that belied the storm brewing beneath her composed exterior. Tonight, she announced with a soft, enigmatic smile, we celebrate clarity in my darkness. Marcus laughed easily, his charm undiminished as he moved through the room. Exchanging jokes with the woman everyone still believed was a nurse, though Olivia knew better. In the kitchen, their whispered conversation floated faintly to Olivia's ears. It's almost over, Marcus said, voice low and eager. Once the final paper is signed, we vanish to Paris. New lives, new fortunes. The woman's voice, smooth and knowing, replied, no loose ends this time. He won't see it coming. Olivia sat still for a moment longer, then rose with a deliberate calm that silenced the room. Glasses paused midway to lips. Forks hovered above plates. A collective gasp rippled through the guests as she reached up and slowly removed her dark glasses, revealing eyes, sharp and unblinking, locking onto Marcus's face. I hope Paris has good prisons, she said, voice steady and cold. The shift was instantaneous. Marcus's confident smile faltered, his body stiffening as the weight of her gaze bore down on him. Without breaking eye contact, Olivia gestured to the wall where a projector flickered to life. The room darkened, the screen illuminating with grainy footage, the secret record of his betrayals laid bare. His forged signatures, the late-night calls plotting to strip her of power, the casual verbal jabs designed to erode her sanity. The proof of his deception hung there like a confession he had no choice but to hear. Tosin stepped forward then, flanked by two sharply dressed lawyers whose presence radiated authority. We've already filed a court injunction, Tosin announced, voice clear and unwavering. All of Olivia's assets have been transferred into a protected trust out of reach and beyond manipulation. The room was silent except for the crackle of the projector and the tension thickening the air. Marcus's facade shattered. Rage exploded across his face as he lunged toward Olivia, fingers curling into fists, fury burning in his eyes. But before he could close the distance, Rita moved faster than anyone expected. With a quiet but firm grip, she intercepted Marcus, holding him back like a mother restraining a furious child. Not today, she whispered, her voice low but fierce. Security personnel, long briefed and standing ready in the shadows, appeared instantly, surrounding Marcus and escorting him from the room. His protests were drowned out by the calm resolve of those who knew the truth. Olivia remained standing, her chest rising and falling steadily as the adrenaline began to ebb. Around her, the friends and allies exchanged looks, some with relief, others with a newfound respect for the woman who had turned the tables so masterfully. As the projector dimmed and the room slowly returned to normal light, Olivia met Tosin's gaze. In that moment, unspoken words passed between them, words forged in years of trust and hardship. The battle was far from over, but the first decisive move had been made. Marcus King, the man who had once seemed untouchable, was no longer invisible, and Olivia King, despite every attempt to erase her, was reclaiming her kingdom. The aftermath of the confrontation rippled through Olivia King's life like a storm settling into a cautious calm. Marcus was swiftly charged with attempted fraud, emotional abuse, and forgery crimes that struck not just at her fortune, but at the very core of her trust. The lawyer who had aided him vanished without a trace, slipping through the cracks of justice as Interpol took up the chase, her name becoming a ghost in international databases. Though some wounds were yet raw and unanswered, Olivia began to reclaim control over her world. In the quiet of her office, behind closed doors, she sought therapy for the first time in years. The sessions were uncomfortable and raw. She allowed herself to unravel in ways she had long denied. She cried not just for the woman she was now, but for the girl who had once loved a lie so deeply that she had almost lost herself. Each tear was a release, a step toward healing. Vulnerability, she discovered, was not weakness but a doorway to strength. Rita, who had always been a silent guardian, was officially promoted to Olivia's assistant and confidant. Their bond deepened, grounded in years of shared history and quiet understanding. Rita's steady presence became the bedrock of Olivia's daily routine, a reminder that loyalty and care could exist beyond power plays. Meanwhile, Tosin stepped up as the company's legal advisor, his sharp mind and unwavering dedication providing a protective shield around Olivia's empire. He was more than a brother. Now he was a trusted pillar in both her personal and professional life. In a bold move, Olivia addressed her entire company in a live broadcast that reached employees from Lagos to New York. Her voice was steady, her eyes clear despite everything. "Even the strongest among us must protect our hearts as fiercely as our empires," she said. She spoke candidly about betrayal and resilience, about the importance of trust and vigilance in every facet of life. The speech was met with overwhelming support, reinforcing her position not only as a CEO, but as a leader who embodied courage through adversity. But Olivia's vision extended beyond the boardroom, drawing on her own journey. She launched a foundation dedicated to empowering women in corporate leadership. Vision beyond sight. The foundation's mission was to provide mentorship, legal support, and resources for women navigating the often treacherous terrain of business and personal integrity. Naming it after her blindness was a reclamation, a symbol that sometimes losing sight could lead to a clearer vision of one's true strength. As she stood in the foundation's inaugural event, surrounded by women from diverse backgrounds, who shared their stories of struggle and triumph, Olivia felt a renewed sense of purpose. The pieces of her life, once shattered by deception, were coming together in a mosaic far stronger and more beautiful than before. She was no longer just the woman who built an empire from a laptop in Lagos. She was a beacon, proof that even through darkness, clarity and power could emerge. Weeks after the dust had settled and the court had delivered its verdict, Olivia found herself alone in her study when a small envelope was slipped under her door. The handwriting was unmistakable Marcus's elegant, deliberate script. She hesitated, fingers trembling as she unfolded the fragile paper inside. The words were simple, raw. I thought I was testing your blindness, but it was my own soul that was blind. You saw me clearer than I saw myself. A bitter confession wrapped in regret. Olivia's chest tightened as she read and reread the note, the weight of his words settling like ash. Then, without another glance, she folded the letter, lit a match, and watched it burn, flames curling upward. Consuming the past she was determined to leave behind. Her voice echoed in memory, steady and resolute. Trust is not given, it is earned and protected, and next time I won't wait until the lights go out to see what's standing in front of me. With that, Olivia rose from her chair, her every movement charged with renewed purpose. She walked into her boardroom, where the world awaited her leadership, head held high, eyes wide open, clear, vigilant, and unbreakable.